Morning, Rosewood. How's everyone doing this morning? We got 10 o'clock, so we'll start. I don't want Scott to get on me, not starting right at 10 o'clock. But yeah, so good morning, everyone. This is June's Leadership Live, and let me share the PowerPoint. So for our June to end this quarter, we have Tarence E. He is no stranger to these Leadership Live, so we are excited to hear what he has to say and kind of go over the topic. Before we start that, we'll always start with our why, and our why is to multiply the blessings and opportunities that have been put onto our trust. And that goes for all companies Rosewood-wise. And we just finished embracing change, and this quarter we're wrapping up our customers, our business, doing the right thing, and we're going to be learning about building a deeper client relationship in customer service. And Tarence O'Shea will kind of go into that and deep dive in there. Like I said, the chat is open. If you guys miss any of the Q2 sessions, please email marketing. We have those on YouTube. You can also go on YouTube and type in Rosewood and find the videos on there. We have them in a playlist, so they kind of all start right there. And there's only a question at the end, so for you to earn participation, just answer the question, email marketing, and we'll put your name on the list to have you complete Q2. So if any questions there, just feel free to reach out to marketing. But Tarence O'Shea, floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Antonio. Can everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up. I see some smiling faces, and I also see a good friend of mine and boss in this case, Dr. Edward Fubara. How are you today, sir? Not sure if he can unmute himself to greet us from Campbell University.
I was waving and thumbs upping. I thought that was enough.
Oh, we need to hear your voice.
Good morning, Rosewood. Good to see you all.
Great. I think we're going to jump right in and get started. Thank you again, Antonio, for putting the PowerPoint together, and he's going to be navigating that. It seems to be a lot easier for me, as well as some of the other presenters, to have him to advance the slides, because it's hard to do more than one thing at a time. Thinking, talking, and also clicking the slides is just kind of a challenge. Some of you have been to some of the sessions that I've done, and I've always enjoyed Rosewood. It's been a few years now that we've been doing some sessions together, and I use you as bragging rights oftentimes about how very earth-centered, down-to-earth this company is, and how your values and your mission statement, as well as your focuses, are constantly being reiterated, and people ascribe to it, and they do reflect very, very godly values that I think are commendable. So thank you for letting me be a part of that. Let's go to the first slide. After the title, of course, of building this deeper client relationship, let's get started. I'm going to have you guys do an exercise in just a moment, but everybody can identify with being a customer at some point. We can also really identify with and reflect on a positive or a negative customer experience that we've had. Likewise, every one of us also serves in a capacity to meet a customer's need. Our internal customers are just as significant and important as our external customers, or end users is what we often identify them as. I've been doing some things in customer service training for about 30 years, and not much has changed as it relates to people. And I often say this too, that in all of my international travels, I found that people are people all over the world, whether they speak English, Spanish, or another language, they are people. And because people are inherently interesting, organic creatures, we're always changing, always growing, always encountering one another. I'm a student of ancient text, and one of the texts that stands out to me is that iron sharpens iron, so does a friend sharpen the countenance of a friend. And when people encounter someone for customer service purposes, just in that moment, they're their friend. They're the friend of yours, like your waiter or waitress, or perhaps somebody delivering something. Just that moment of friendship. And we should have some positive experiences. Unfortunately, we've had some negative ones as well. So in this intersection, we want to take the time to start looking at the elements of great customer and client relations. Great, not just good, but great. I think it's Peter Collins who has written the book or the series of training on Good to Great. And I think great is the goal when we talk about improving our customer relations. Let's do this exercise really quick. I have put in the chat, or it should be popping up here, just a moment, a quick exercise. It's the warm-up engagement. I'd like for you to type in the chat one word, just one word, to describe your most memorable customer service experience. Now, notwithstanding, it could have been negative, it could have been positive, it could have been you were the customer, it could have been that you were the customer service provider. You don't have to qualify any of that. Just one word to describe the experience, the customer service experience. Thank you, Shani. Personable. And let's take a look at these words as they pop up. Sunshine, trust and productive, genuine. Keep them coming. I think there are 47 of us on the call, so we should get a large sample. Great, thoughtful, heard, knowledgeable, unique, exceptional. That stands out. Confident, inquisitive, caring, exemplary. Well, while they're coming, just start thinking about how these words are the words that people are sharing about you. These are the words that people are sharing about you, your company, what you do, the area of service that you provide. If it's a tangible physical product or if it's a service that will ultimately allow someone to consume a product, either way it goes, we are in the business of customer service, all of us. I think about what Peter Drucker said, and it's here on the bottom of the slide. The single most important thing to realize about any enterprise is that there are no results inside its walls. The results of a business is a satisfied customer, which is true, that the inside the walls, meaning not just the company itself, because there are some internal customers that would have to be satisfied as well. And with a family of companies like Rosewood, there are a lot of customers to deal with. There are vendors and suppliers and departments and marketing teams and sales teams and line workers, as well as supervisors and middle management. So there are some complexities to the type of customer service that can be encountered internally. Looking back at this list, I see a lot of confident and caring and personal and intentional and satisfying. These are all positive experiences. Is there anybody who's willing to say, or maybe even type in a word to describe a negative experience that you had? What is the word that comes to mind with a negative customer experience? Just anybody type one in. I want to grab it and do something with it. Frustrating. Let's go with that. So, of course, opposite of satisfying, somebody can be frustrated. There's defensive, incompetent, rude. And all of those words, rude shows up a couple of times. Rude, rude, rude. Those show up a couple of times because when people don't have people skills, they don't communicate with people. When people lack the emotional intelligence of empathy or maybe even compassion, they lack the sensitivity to meet people's needs. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, about meeting both personal as well as practical needs. Thanks for sharing those. Defensive and overwhelmed. It can be overwhelming. Sometimes I'll just abort the situation overall. Like if it's going bad, if it's a souring type customer service situation and I'm the customer and they're providing poor customer service, I'll just digress. I'll go someplace else. I'll walk out of the store. And those are the kinds of things that keeps my head level. We'll talk a little bit about that. Let's advance to the next slide, Antonio. Thanks. So our targeted objectives is that we'll look at variables associated with finding common interests as a starting point for building stronger connections with clients. The goal is to have stronger connections. Participants will navigate the intersection between meeting clients' expectations and creating more personalized customer service experience, leading to increased satisfaction, and then of course, loyalty. I often said in the classes that I was teaching about customer services that the best customer is a satisfied customer, and the greatest customer is the repeating customer, the one who keeps coming back. The objectives really include defining what good customer service is, what it is that actually mean, and then exploring strategies and techniques to discover common interest effectively. What are the common interests that we have? And then connect with customers on a deeper level. Deal with the difficult customer encounters proficiently. How do you handle the difficult encounter? Now, I could have stopped at difficult customers, when in actuality, a well-trained individual would know that the customers aren't difficult, the encounter is challenging. So if we label our customers as a difficult customer, there's a disadvantage automatically. So let's think about those situations as difficult encounters. Let's go to the next slide. If you've got questions or comments, you can toss your hand up or drop something in the chat. I do have my chat open. I can't see all of the hands, but I can definitely see the chat if you do want to pause and ask a question. So the intended outcomes by the end of today's session is that you should be able to identify good customer service, what it really means in a relational way, both to the internal and external customer. And then also recognize how your attitude, emotional intelligence both affect customer service outcomes. Identify opportunities to gain deeper interpersonal dynamics to meet the specific needs, and then implement outstanding techniques, communication techniques. That's the most important element of customer service is communication. We'll also look at building goodwill through the in-person encounters. Now that we live in a hybrid world where we can be all over the country and still converge in a class like today, we have to consider the golden opportunities that we have when we are in person, when we do have face-to-face human contact. And then number 6, connect effectively with customers or clients over the phone or online. How do we do that effectively? I was concerned about my background and sitting in front of a window here in my home office, and I blurred the background screen so that the light would not be a distraction. So those are the things that help us to provide good or great customer service, paying attention to details, even online or on the phone. And then number 7, deal with those difficult encounters. Let's go to the next slide. Are there any other outcomes that you all would like to discuss? We can drop those in the chat. Any other outcomes or anything that you would like for us to cover? Drop that in. So what is customer service? Here's some key elements. And remember, these aren't the quintessential 100 top answers, top 10 of the 100 answers. These are elements that I have found to be important or significant when we talk about the encounter of customer service. One, it's very essential to the operations of the organization. You can make the most excellent, let's say, baked goods. But if you don't have anybody buying those baked goods and consuming those baked goods and loving those baked goods and sharing those baked goods and talking about those baked goods, you're just baking goods, and then they won't be so good for so long. So you have to think about how essential good customer service is to the operations of an organization. We also need to think about the attention to detail that I mentioned a little bit earlier, because the details is what really matter. Think for a moment about the intricate details of remembering to close a door. If you are an airline employee, say that you're responsible for the front end of the cabin and, oh, oops, I forgot to close the door. Well, when the plane takes off, that's going to be a problem for a lot of people, right? So the attention to details is vital. Pre-sales interaction assessment, meaning assess your situation prior to any type of sales encounter. And then the point of sale interaction, that would be assessing the interaction while you're doing the transaction, and then post-service follow-up. I separated those 3 because sometimes people are good at 1 of the 3 or 2 of the 3, but rarely have we mastered all 3 of the 3. And that's something that we can set as a personal goal. So I'm sure there are more. What are some of the other customer service elements that you all can think of? I'll pause for a minute and let you drop it in the chat, or feel free to take your technology off of mute and interject. What are some other elements of customer service that you think of besides these? This is only 5 of them. I'm sure there are more. This is where everybody fights to become involved and interactive. Interpersonal skills and connection. Thanks, Callie. Quality over quantity. I like that because that's a value, and some companies have that as a value. Yes. Education on the new products and services, as well as anticipating what those customers' needs are. We are going to address that one for sure. Cleanliness, that is vitally important. I was at Chipotle, one of my favorite restaurants in the whole wide world. I was at Chipotle day before yesterday, and the one that I happened to visit, I stood over and kind of looked behind the counter, and of course, there was almost as much food on the floor as there was on the counters. So it kind of changed my image of that particular experience. So I've got to think twice before I go back to that one, or at least hope they cleaned it up. Anticipating those customers' needs, also asking for feedback to learn from the customers. Yes, that is important. And then, of course, being engaged. That's vitally important. If you're not having a two-way transactional process, it's not communication. And if communication is one of the essential key elements to this process, we got to make sure that we're engaged and engaging. Let's advance to the next slide. You guys can keep those coming if you want. So who are the customers? When we talk about customers, we divide them into 2 categories: not happy and sad, or good or bad, or mean or surly. No, we identify them as internal customers and external customers. The internal customers our peers and our coworkers, starting there, starting with our peers and our coworkers. And then there's the interdepartmental and divisional connections that we make, as well as anybody else inside the organization, all the way from the front door to the C-suite. These are all internal customers. And then externally, we identify customers as the end users of our product, good, or service. And then, of course, there's the traditional customer of someone walking in for retail, sales, or service. Anyone outside of the organization that interacts with anyone inside of the organization really is considered a customer. A vendor, maybe a supplier. These are customers at some point because the interaction mirrors that of a customer transaction. Let's advance the slides. So when we mentioned, or I mentioned that communication is key to customer service, these are some of the elements that we need to look at. You can look at communication by this definition. It's the act of transferring information from one place or person or a group to another with the intent to get positive feedback or positive outcomes. We don't communicate with the intent to have a fight. We don't communicate with the intent to disconnect. We communicate with the intent to resolve conflict or to make sure that there is a positive connection on the line of two-way transactions taking place. Every communication encounter involves at least one sender. There's a message, of course, and then there's the receiver. Variable factors include emotions, the cultural situation, the medium that you use to communicate, as well as the physical location. And I want to add something. In customer service, the product in and of itself becomes a communication tool, meaning the baked goods. If somebody's got outstanding baked goods, you really can't convince the consumer or the customer until they try them. So sometimes you'll see people use strategies like giveaways, free test tastings, 30-day trial periods for services to make sure that communication connection is there based on the product, the good, or the service being interfaced by the customer itself. So Tony Robbins says this: to effectively communicate, we must realize that we are all different in the way we perceive the world and use this to understand as a guide to our communication with others. I think what's really meant by that is we communicate differently, but we all want to communicate. We perceive the world differently, but we all want to communicate. We speak different languages, but we all want to communicate. And we have different needs and wants and desires, but we all want to communicate. So the key in a customer service encounter is to establish we both want to communicate. I have a product that I want you to buy, or I have a service that I'd like for you to consume and be satisfied, or you have a service that I need. So communication has to be paramount. Feel free to jump in with questions or comments. Let's go to the next slide, Antonio. So what's the role of customer service providers? What would be the role of the person on the side of providing the customer service? It's, of course, to meet the personal as well as the practical needs, which we'll break down in just a moment. But it's also to focus on the vision, the mission, and the values of both your organization, the one you represent, and also the organization of the individual, meaning that we'll respect their mission, their vision, and their values as we convey ours. If we happen to have opposing or conflicting mission, vision, and values, we've already got roadblocks to the communication process, and it could inhibit our ability to provide good or great customer service. The other role of the customer service provider is to positively impact the experience of the customer. Notice I use the word experience, not just the product. Of course, the product speaks for itself, but what was the experience? If someone in a 5-star restaurant brings the food to me cold and slams it on the table without any eye contact or concern, my experience is not going to be good, whether the food was prepared well, the accoutrements of the environment were nice, everything was perfect, except the experience that I had with that particular individual. And then, of course, another role is to complete the job duties as required with excellence. If my job is to sell widgets, I've got to sell widgets, but I need to sell widgets with all these other factors in mind, or I'm going to be in trouble as it relates to sustaining my job. And then, of course, promoting repeat business. That's the clincher for me. Is one of my feedback questions is, would you do business with me again? You know, would you have me back? Or would you buy my product again? Those types of questions help us to tweak or adjust in order to be prepared for the next customer encounter. Residual is a very important word when we talk about customer service. The residual effects of these residual income, the residual relationship, that it's going to come back and it's going to come back 100-fold. Next slide. So identifying and addressing those needs. And remember, this is kind of an overarching presentation. And at the end, I'll open up for some more specific questions that you might have if I don't cover your area of interest. But the first step in improving customer service relationship is to determine what customers value in their interaction with you and your organization. What do they really want? What do they really need? And the question is, can you meet that need? Can you meet the need of what they want? Sometimes it may be a point of disconnect when you have already maxed out on your ability to meet that customer's need. Think for a moment about the old traditional department store. If I walk into Sears and Roebuck, formerly Sears and Roebuck, and I walk into the tool and let's say gardening supply area, but I'm looking for perfumes and colognes, I'm not going to get it in that department. But the person working in that department should be able to direct me, lead me, escort me, or point me in the direction to get what it is that I need. And that is true in any area of providing customer service, that if you can't do it, who within the organization or who else, a peer, a counterpart, another division or department, may be able to help meet the need. Popularly right now, there's this new position called Scrum Master. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Scrum Master concept. There are a lot of Scrum Masters popping up all over the place. And you know what I call them? Troubleshooters and problem solvers. That's really what they're doing. And they're helping to bridge the gap between what you need internally and externally to provide what's needed internally and externally. So Scrum Mastering is a thing. And I think that that's how we find and address the needs of our customers. Any thoughts or comments before I quote the General Colin Powell? Colin Powell says, endeavors succeed or fail because of the people that are involved. Only by attracting the best people will you accomplish great deeds. And that speaks volumes about our teams. It speaks volumes about who we hire. And not only can they do the service or provide the skill set, but can they do it well and can they do it within the expectations of our organization? That's an important piece because the assessment of identifying a customer's needs start with who's doing the assessing or who's meeting the need. Let's go to the next slide. So let's break down these needs, these basic needs. There are the personal needs and the practical needs of a customer. There's the personal needs and the practical needs of the customer service provider. Now, the provider of the customer service will delay or postpone their needs in order to meet the need of the customer. Of course, we won't ignore the need because if I provide you with a service, I need payment. If I give you a product, I'll need cash. Those are the things that are personal as well as practical on the side of the provider. But we delay that in order to make sure our focus and our attention is on meeting both the personal and the practical need of the customer. John Maxwell said it like this, and I'm sure you've probably heard it before, is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's the personal need. The practical need is that I may have a product that you want to buy, but the personal need is I need it now, I need it delivered here, I need it with these certain ramifications. And so we have to be sensitive when we're providing customer service to address both personal as well as practical needs. Think for a moment about somebody who may be physically challenged or have a disability. When they are interfacing the product or the service, they have a different set of personal needs than someone else who doesn't have those particular challenges. So we have to be practical for everybody, but we also need to be personal when necessary. Are there any thoughts or questions about this? I don't want to skip over it too soon or too much too quickly. All right, let's go to the next slide. So let's understand the customer's relationship in context, the context of the customer or client. I use those terms interchangeably because in some cases, people will identify them as clients because they have a relationship and it's ongoing. And then in other cases, it would be customer because we've kind of limited that to tangible products, cash and carry kind of exchange. But they're interchangeable because sometimes those intangible deliverables are even greater than the actual product itself. I mean, if I sold toilet paper, it's a necessity. Toilet paper is toilet paper, but the experience of me selling toilet paper and making the customer feel important, special, and their needs met could be the deal breaker or it could be the relationship maker. Let's look at these points. Allow the customer to communicate, meaning we listen, we allow them to speak, tell us what they need. Also, we can help them to identify their needs by asking a few questions. Questions, of course, with deliverables that we can provide, but just listening, learning from their shared experiences. They can say, hey, my previous encounter with buying this product was, and then as they share that, we got now sensors going off saying, I want to make sure that I don't make those mistakes, or I'd like to repeat that, or maybe one up it if I could in a practical way. Of course, you want to practice friendliness. Being friendly is a vital, important piece. Back to the example of someone slamming your five-star dinner down on the table. But being friendly is going to be vitally important. And I shared also the ancient text of friends sharpening friends. Another thing is the utilizing empathy. When we can sense a person's urgency or a person's distraction or a person's need, it's a problem for them if they don't have the product that they need. Let's think for a moment about Amazon and how Amazon oftentimes offers solutions to problems that are much larger than a product itself. The problem is not the product. The problem is I needed the product yesterday. So Amazon delivers it today as opposed to 3 weeks from now. And so you think about meeting that need in the time in which I need it. That's empathetic. But then you can also think about what the product is. My wife works for the Department of Defense, and she's a contracting officer for the state. And they buy everything from catered meals to body bags for the military. Of course, when she's ordering and buying body bags, there's a complete different sense of gravity in her transactions in making those purchases. And so that's just an example of how you've got to be in tune to what it is you're buying or selling and empathetic to the person who is buying or selling with you. Exhibiting fairness and friendliness are similar, but you've got to be equitable and being fair. Customers are always listening, meaning if I'm standing in line, I'm listening to how you treat the customer ahead of me. And if I'm standing on the side waiting, I'm listening to how you've treated customers after me, because fairness should be across the board. Sharing information, being able to give updated information where necessary. I had a car rental experience last week in St. Louis where that car rental place probably should be out of business just based on how bad they handled, the customer service providers, the counter people were very, very helpful, but the systems were pretty bad as far as getting vehicles to people, and waited 2.5 hours for a rental car. And my flight was only an hour and a half. And the destination driving would have only been 4 hours, so 4 to 5 hours. So it really disturbed me that I had that experience. Sharing information though on how to meet the need or how to make things better, and then also offering support along the way. What made my customer service experience somewhat palatable is that there was a person who managed the front end, and she kept coming out to the line telling everybody, thank you for your patience. We apologize. We're backed up. We're waiting on vehicles to get ready for you. There's water here in the cooler. She kept offering the support necessary to kind of bring down the heat in that space or that environment. And it was hot, no pun intended. Also limit our presumptuous thoughts. Let's not presume anything when we talk about providing customer service, especially internal. The internal customer service relationship comes to mind here, because if we automatically assume or if we make presumptions that our internal customers know what we know, or they think like we think, we could head into a very treacherous situation. Let the customer guide you, meaning let them tell us what it is they need. Don't tell them what they need. And then refrain from making any type of snap judgments. And that could be judgments based on appearance. It could be judgment based on a person's intellect. It could be judgment based on their dialect, their conversation, anything. We have to be careful in cultural context to not make snap judgments. And then also pause and listen. Notice listening and communicating is heavy laden in these lists. Also close with feedback. Something such as what I hear you saying is, or thank you for your time. I really appreciate how you did these things. Positive feedback is a great way to keep the door open for more business and more customer relations, deeper customer relations. Always follow up. Always follow up. Even if it's just a one-time sales encounter, follow up to see how well they are enjoying the product. I think about oftentimes when you go to a restaurant and you're eating a meal, the terminology has changed. The waiter or waitress comes back and they don't ask, how is everything? They'll ask you, how good is everything? You know, how great is your meal today? And they'll offer you the option of giving feedback. Following up is key and very, very vital to repeat business. And then I put, of course, rinse and repeat, which means that if some of these contextual elements don't work just right, rinse them and start them again. Go back and do them again. You could find yourself in a situation where it's impossible to please a customer because they choose not to be pleased. And I'm just using my words wisely. There are some people who you cannot please. They have decided in life that they are going to live in misery and they invite company. But when you come across those individuals, you have to maintain your sense of stability and your sense of kindness and friendliness and empathy and fairness, regardless of how they've treated you. Sometimes you have to take a walk, you know, after encountering a very difficult customer or a difficult customer encounter, you have to take a walk so that the next encounter will not have the influence of the previous one. Are there thoughts on any of these before we advance? The next slide. Watching my clock here. We do have time, and I want to pause here and give you guys to come off of a chance to come off of mute and to make a couple of comments or statements. We're going to enter into discussing how attitude is vitally important. Attitude is everything. I often say that great customer service and client relations begin with a great attitude. Whose attitude? The customer or the customer service provider? I'd say both. What are your thoughts about this statement? What are your thoughts on this statement? This is where you guys get engaged.
I think you're kind of right. I think it depends. I always tease because everyone's going to have a bad day. And sometimes those people that are having that moment, they need that moment to speak, to just be heard and to get it off their chest. And then how you can go back is by saying, okay, this is what I heard your issue is, and this is how I'm going to help you with it. If it's a negative moment, if it's not, then your first representation of yourself, the first representation of our companies may be us. You know, I'm in the recruiting land. So for me, I represent most of the companies and I'm the first face of the company. So I'm always trying to be upbeat, always trying to be positive. There's certain parts of my interviews that get kind of boring. I try and change them up a little bit just to make it so it's, you know, a conversation and not just a checklist I'm going through. But then there's some things that I'm very like straightforward when it comes to money. I won't, you know, like goof around. I want that to be something more clear on the same page because I feel that that's important and that's not something that you should be kind of silly about. That's important to everybody. And I think everyone respects that because they understand that I'm seeing how important it is for them and back and forth. So you build that relationship by just saying those little things and respecting where they're coming from. And then suddenly you're building a rapport as you're going through the conversations and addressing the issues and their concerns. You know, why is working for us such a great thing for them? You know, you sell the company, but then at the same time, they have to sell themselves.
Yeah.
But we have that attitude throughout our companies because we are such a diverse company and what we're doing. Sometimes we're helping our employees and sometimes we're helping our clients. Sometimes we're talking to, you know, different parts of our clients, you know, necessarily, you know, what we're doing and how we interact. So I think we always have to keep that in the back of our mind is that we are our first representation sometimes of our customers and our customers can change throughout our day.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That first face makes all the difference in the world. And you got to get the right people in the right seats on the bus. Because if you've got an antisocial individual who exercises introversion over extroversion, they probably are not the best first face that you want. You want some of the skill sets that say, hey, I'm engaging. I like to face challenges head on. I want to invite people in. And like I said, using humor at the appropriate time or just lightening things up. We live in a tough world. There's a lot of very tough things happening every single day. And so it's important to give people a positive experience. I'm looking at the chat here, Freddie. I agree with you. Attitude is the one thing that you can control in every interaction, your own attitude. And you can influence other people's attitudes. Not only can I control mine, but I can influence yours by my approach, my smile, my tone. Like attitude is a conscious decision. I like that. That is absolutely true. Attitudes and emotions are contagious. Unhappy employees can breed unhappy customers. That is correct. and vice versa. Unhappy customers can breed unhappy employees. You have to be aware of how you are coming across. You may accidentally come across with a negative attitude or tone, but smiling when you speak affects how your voice sounds and can reduce the potential to sound impatient or not understand. That's absolutely true. If we were in person, well, let's try it. We don't have to be in person. There's an exercise that I often do with people. Say the word success, success, success. You can even spell the word success, success. You can't say success without smiling. Try it without smiling. Try to say success without smiling. Sounds like you're saying life sucks. All right. So success has to be something that you say with a smile because it's not just monetary. It's not money only. It's accomplishment, achievement, inclusion, acknowledgement, acceptance. Success could be we closed the deal and we did a good job. Or I got what I needed, you got what you needed, and we're both happy. Well, success, in saying that word with a smile, is a reflection of my attitude. Not just my attitude about success, but my attitude about anything that we're talking about. I can just use that. So think of the word success. Whenever you're having that moment of kind of declining in your attitude, think of success. Just say the word success. Think about keeping your job. Think about how successful you'll be as you climb the corporate ladders of success. So that's a little secret that I share often. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you all for these comments. It does reflect our leadership. Melissa, that is absolutely true. Our leadership and then how we are being led. It's a reflection, a chain reaction. Let's look at this noun called attitude. It's manner, disposition, feeling, position, etc. with regard to a person or a thing, tendency or orientation, especially of the mind, meaning attitudes take place in our mind, but they manifest out of our mouths. So in my mind, I feel a certain way, or in my heart or my thought process, I have a disposition, but it's going to come out in the way that I encounter you. Meaning if I had a bad day, somebody mentioned that earlier, I now have to encounter you, so I have the choice. Do I spread my bad day onto you, or do I deal with my bad day and give you the opportunity to have a good day through our encounter? Let's go to the next slide. Think about how we establish our attitude. The greatest discovery of our generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitude of mind. And William James said that. We might all define customer service a little differently, but we can all agree on this one thing, and that is to provide great customer service, you need to put the energy and enthusiasm into your interactions or your attitude. So before I answer the phone, I have to think success. Hello, welcome to the Rosewood group. How can I help you? That sounds a little bit different than, this is Terence, how can I help you? You know, or yeah, what's up? I can remember somebody answering the phone once at a place of business, and it sounded like they were asleep. And they're like, hello? And my question to them was, are you okay? And they go, huh? And I go, are you okay? And they go, yeah, why? I said, because I called thinking that somebody would identify themselves and the company that I called, and you just simply said hello. And I kind of made light of it, but they checked themselves and they go, oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't focusing. I just answered the phone without thinking, and their tone changed. And I had to turn that around because whatever negativity they were putting out, I ran the risk of catching that. It's infectious. And so I wanted to make sure that we reset the conversation by lightening it up a little bit and asking them how they were doing. But I was a customer, right? Let's go to the next slide. I often share this, and this is from Chuck Swindoll. He's a great speaker, author. He pastored for years, but many people have heard this used in context or part of it. But I want you to think for a moment about this. The longer that I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It's more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than what other people think, say, or do. It is more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, a home. The remarkable thing is that we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for that day. We cannot change the past. We cannot change the fact that people will act a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string we have, and that is our attitude. I'm convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes. I'm sure some of you have heard that before. What part of that stands out to you? What part of that can you identify with or embrace when we talk about building a deeper connection with our customers? Is it the part about the 10% versus the 90%? Or is it the part about the fact that we're in control of the attitude that we have for that day? I get to decide when I wake up and get out of the bed whether or not it's going to be a good day or whether it's going to be a bad day. Owning our reactions. Thanks, Kelly. I love how that's perfect timing. It popped up right when I was thinking that. Own our own reactions. And think about our proactiveness as well as our reactions. I can set the tone for my kids, my grandkids now. If they're here and I want it to be a good day, I said, hey, let's get up and have blueberry waffles. Yay. I might not even want blueberry waffles, but if I can introduce it to them as that, they'll come alive with a positive perspective about the day. Even though those blueberry waffles may be all over the floor by the end of the breakfast experience, with the 2-year-old, it's still worth offering them the opportunity to be excited or to embrace that. And that's proactive, because when it's nap time, I'm going to bring back to them, remember, we started out with blueberry waffles today. It was a good day. Now it's time for a nap. Said the grandpa who gets tired quickly. Let's go to the next slide. We're almost done. So the impact of this positive attitude causes people to see opportunities, as well as spot problems in enough time to take actions to avoid the major consequences of something going in the wrong direction. They also look out for customers and coworkers and themselves, as well as their organization, in every project and every activity that they're involved with. They enjoy their work. There was another adage that we hear very often or have heard over the years. This is how you know you're getting old. You start hearing things and you don't even know where it came from, but you still say it. And that is, you should love your work, love what you do, and do what you love. Do what you love and love what you do. I've heard that many times. I've even seen it on a placard somewhere in Hobby Lobby, I'm sure. So we need to be more likely to be promoted based on our positive attitude. And then producing, of course, positive work environments comes out of having a positive attitude. Here's a question in the chat. Does a positive attitude reduce stress? Absolutely does. I think it does. I'm not a scientist or a doctor or anything, but I believe that there is some statistical data somewhere that our stress hormones and our stress levels decrease when we have a positive attitude. I do know that cortisol that transpires when people get enraged, there's a negative energy, is life-threatening. It actually produces poisons or toxins in your body. But when you're able to release the adrenaline of satisfaction, it actually brings the stresses down. And so, I think a positive attitude would reduce our stress. Somebody else can feel free to pipe in and respond to that. I know for me, it has been practical to associate my stress level with my dissatisfaction. The more satisfied I am, the less stressed I am in a customer encounter. And then the more willing I am to communicate, usually, breeds more of a positive outcome, reducing the stressful conversation. I'm also an advocate of not allowing someone else to stress you out. Think for a moment about a negative attitude. Say Sherry decides to call a department and they have a negative attitude about something going on, but she's adamant about having a great day. She could make sure that when she finishes that conversation, I'm not going to let that affect me in any way. Meaning the walls or the barriers that kind of buffer us to say, hey, don't mess up my stuff. All right. There's a very popular social influencer that always signs off her post by saying, you all have a good day. And if you can't, don't you go messing up nobody else's. And I think that that's a really good adage to attitude in how when we're having a good day, we can help someone else to have a good day. But if we're not, we should not destroy someone else's. Let's go to the next slide. Let's see what Callie's saying. Having a positive attitude is a decision, which means it isn't dependent on your environment. Therefore, regardless of what comes your way, even if it's a stressful situation, you can choose to have a positive attitude and adapt to or pivot when necessary. That is absolutely true. And we're all living survivors of that. Nobody counted on COVID. Nobody realized that it was going to impact us the way that it did. And those who pivoted survived the attitudinal impact of that because we were able to change the perspective of those who wore masks and those who didn't, and those who practiced 6 foot and those who didn't. I mean, there were so many different variations required, and it was attitudinal. Let's talk about human contact and how important it is for us to make good eye contact. I'm trying to read the screen, but I'm also looking at my camera every now and then to give you guys the pleasure of great eye contact. And I'm getting the same from you. Sherry's giving me life right now, believe it or not. Every time I see her smiling and giggling and laughing, it makes a difference for me. And I'm drawn off of that energy. If we were in person, she'd be the person I'd gravitate to as I'm standing in front of the group. So making eye contact and good body language makes a difference when we talk about making that deeper connection. Personalizing the encounter. Notice I called Sherry by her name because, and every time I say her name, she kind of smiles and chuckles. And that's a natural thing. People are entreated positively when you address them by their name. And it's best to call people what they introduce themselves as. Because Sherry's name is Sherry on the screen here. I can call her Sherry. I shouldn't take the liberty of calling her Shira because I want to give her a nickname. Often I'll introduce myself as Terence and people go, "Hi, Terry, how's it going?" And I'm going, "I'm not Terry." And they'll insist on using Terry, but that could be a declining element in our interaction, depending on how I feel about being called Terry versus being called Terence. So personalizing the encounter. Intentional observation. That's going to be important too, is making intentional observations. Someone has, let's say Raven. Raven has a picture of a cat as the screensaver there. And I think that that's entertaining. That's exciting. Well, that's a detail that I'm making an observation. And because I mentioned Raven's name, now Raven is going to be a little in tune, whether Raven takes the screen off of mute or not. Now that I've mentioned Raven's name and made an intentional detail acknowledgement of the cat. What's the cat's name, Raven?
Salem and Mr. Darcy.
Salem and Mr. Darcy. Thanks for sharing that. Well, that's a good way to start a conversation with people. You know, you love cats, even if you don't. Raven obviously does, because Raven's screensaver has featured 2 very important creatures. Thanks for sharing that. Another one is listen, listen, and listen. That's not a typo. That's important to know that we listen both with our eyes, we listen with our ears, we listen with our hearts. We don't just listen with our ears. We listen with all 3 of those elements. And sometimes we can listen with other senses that we have. Interjecting feedback is important to affirm that there is a connection. What I hear you saying, I think Sherry used that as an example. I think that's important to always interject feedback to affirm, and then mirroring body language with a certain level of comfortability. I'm seated, and I share this oftentimes because I'm an excited presenter. When I'm standing up, I'm moving around, and I'm but because you guys are seated, I'm seated. And I thought it's best for me to stay seated because otherwise I'd be up and my hands would be flying and I'd be moving all over and I wouldn't be in the camera shot. So try to mirror body language when you're having a customer service interaction. You got to be very, very conscientious about it. I like how Scott just kind of leaned back and gave us that casual, let's have a drink of coffee here. Mirroring that says we're taking a break, we're taking a pause, or we're thinking alike right now. Those have to be very natural and comfortable transitions in the dynamic of a relationship with people and customers. The next one, of course, would be to smile where appropriate. You don't want to smile while somebody's sharing bad news or when somebody's lamenting about their dissatisfaction. You got to be careful. Wait and smile at the appropriate time. And then, of course, you want to close with a compliment as well as gratitude. Thank you so much. Wow, that was a really, really good presentation, or thank you for sharing that with me. Back to the bakery. I've got food on my mind, as you can tell. Thank you. That was really good. It was one of the best blueberry muffins I ever had. Be honest, but share compliments. And the other thing, of course, is leave with a follow-up plan. When can I get some more blueberry muffins? Or when can we talk again? Or when should I schedule the next delivery of this particular product? Always have a follow-up plan, because you're not just in the business of sales, you're in the business of providing a need. providing a need. Um, I thought about a guy who has this used car business. He says, I'm not a used car salesperson. Says, I'm actually in the business of helping meet people's transportation needs. And, that sounds like a car salesman, right? But it actually is his true, honest, it's his ministry, providing people with reliable transportation as opposed to just selling cars. Now, how many know that his business and his customer service relations go way up high by presenting himself that way, as opposed to I'm just a used car salesperson? Great. Our time's almost up. We do have a couple more slides. Let's go to the next one. Talk about the power of a smile. I said it a little bit earlier with success. You'll never look at the word success the same, but smiles indicate friendliness. Friendliness. You got to be conscientious about where you're smiling. I grew up in a very challenging neighborhood on the east side of Detroit, and you can be friendly, but you have to make it quick and don't linger in those neighborhoods that I grew up in. But you have to be conscientious of when you smile. It's appropriate to smile in certain situations, and in other situations you don't smile, you keep a straight face and keep moving. So you cannot blanketly just use smile everywhere and anywhere, but it definitely goes a long, long way. I think of Amazon again. I think their logo and part of their marketing campaign was a smile, and it's been effective. Also, when people smile after encountering you, it could be a reflection of a positive experience that they had. It could also be very welcoming for people to see somebody smiling. And then, of course, it's a retention tool, and it has a great deal of nonverbal impact. I can't give you the statistics on this, but there are so many muscles in your face, and those facial muscles are used to both smile or frown. You use less muscles smiling than you do frowning. It has a nonverbal impact on the people, because if you're smiling while I'm talking, I'll keep talking. You stop smiling, I'm going to stop talking. And so it's important to get a smile every now and then. Beverly just gave me one, so I'll keep going. Even with the teeth, that even works. Great. I love it. Let's go to the next slide. We're almost there. Appearance counts as well. I did go and put on a shirt. I had a t-shirt on earlier, and then I thought Dr. Fuvaro would probably fire me if I came on with the t-shirt, when this company, of course, has some dress codes and some expectations. So I had to grab a button down. Customers' perceptions and opinions really do matter. Sometimes people are so confident or overly confident to where they ignore the fact that a customer's perceptions could make or break that deal. And so it's important to dress appropriately. Dress for your role in the environment. Meaning, if I'm now in your office space and you're working in an office, whether it's at home or at a company location, I need to reflect respect for that space, even online. So since we're doing online stuff, make sure your backgrounds are neutral enough to not be a distraction, and make sure that your attire is not a distraction when it comes to encountering your customers. So maintain the standards and the dress codes and uniforms of the organization. Even online, people can wear logos that a person can read, and it could be a small non-verbal communication that says, hey, I'm representing the company. And then neutralizing the environment, of course, with that professional attire keeps people feeling safe. If I had on a tank top, you probably would have a hard time listening to what was coming out of my mouth. Yep. Next slide. So as we bring this to a close, and I want to leave these last few minutes for conversation from you all, let's think about how important this one is. This is so important in building a deeper relationship and making connection. In fact, we can use even this discussion on this slide to build a deeper relationship with people. So you can encounter them, let's say in person. Hey, how's it going? Good. You're looking good. Are you working out? Honest observation. Yeah, really? So what do you do? Oh, I walk 2 miles a day. Really? So I heard that walking is really helpful in reducing stress. And at the same time, you can burn some calories. Is it true? Yeah, it's true. Are you change your diet, or are you just doing the walking? Well, I'm just doing the walking right now, but I have become a little bit more disciplined in my food intake, because I know I got to walk it off. So if you notice, that conversation just started rolling into a connection, and then you can share back and forth equally with people as it relates to eating, or as it relates to resting, as it relates to what you're doing to stay well. Wellness is a high priority in every field of work. No matter what the customer sales is, wellness is important. Let's be well. I think it's Walgreens that has that as their motto. You know, at the end of their customer service encounter, they say, be well. Even if it's, you know, on the little keypad, they have it typed in, be well. And so that's an important piece, but it's also a good starting point for a deeper relationship. Eating well, resting well, hydrating, staying hydrated with H2O. That's water. It's the best. For some reason, my kids always thought that Tahitian treat, pop, or Sprite, squirt, all of those were good hydrators, and they're not. Believe it or not, the sports drinks aren't even good hydrators. They're not. It's important for us to think about water. If the earth is 2/3 water, our physical bodies are 2/3 water, that means that our creator thought it best that we keep the water going. So we always need to keep some water close by, nearby. And then, of course, having some type of daily human interaction, working in a cubicle or a cave, synonymous if you don't get out and see people, if you don't talk to humans every now and then. Make sure that you are selective with the humans that you talk to and that they talk back in a good way. And then releasing the stress through exercise. I didn't mention that, I won't belabor it, but some form of exercise regimen really helps us. I was talking to a client earlier today, and I was walking literally and had on earpiece, and they were, and it was a casual conversation, just a follow up, and they appreciated the fact that I was walking, and so you know we stayed connected there. Enjoying music, art, theater, nature, sightseeing. Those are some ways to stay healthy. And then of course, laughter is like medicine. Keeping those things in mind, I'm going to turn it over for any questions. Open up for any conclusive thoughts or comments. And if not, I'll give it to Antonio. Last slide, sir. Great. I want to see if I missed anything in the chat. I think we got about 2 or 3 minutes here for some questions or comments. What's your takeaway? Who'd like to share? What's your takeaway? Thanks, Colleen.
I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
When you're thinking about customer service, you talked about like interjecting feedback in a conversation, and you might be interacting with people all over the country, and there's different like societal norms of what's considered respectful and what's considered disrespectful. So how do you like navigate that of like it's respectful or considered respectful to say yes ma'am or yes sir down here, but like if you say it in the north, it can be kind of disrespectful. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, up north, if you call me a sir, you're saying I'm an old man. But down south, if you say sir, it's a compliment. And yeah, I think you'd have to do your research, but you test the waters. You know, is it okay that I call you sir? Or is it okay I call you ma'am? You know, I called my wife ma'am one time. She goes, I got you, ma'am. You know, so it was an insult for her because she thought I was referring to her as being old. So it's best to do your research. And when I say research, it could be ask the question or listen to see how they encounter each other in that space or that environment, you know, and don't make any presumptions because somebody down south could be from up north and just happen to translate down there and they go, whoo, I'm so glad nobody else uses that. So find out. I think it's easier or safer, no shame or embarrassment, and just asking, hey, is it okay if I say that to you? What I don't like is going into a restaurant and everybody's hun or babe. Hey, hon, have a seat right over there, hon. Oh, okay, babe, I'll be with you in a second, hon. And I'm going, we are not that intimate, so please. You know? But in a southern environment, that might be acceptable and a compliment. So yeah, I would ask. Or, you know, like in my hon or babe encounter, I'd say, my name's Terence. What's your name? So now I just gave the waiter or waitress how I want to be addressed. And then when I get their name, I address them that way. So that's the best way to do it. Thanks, Kelly. Other comments, questions, feedback, takeaways?
I think too, I mean, we've been talking about how to talk to people and positive outlooks and conversations and stuff, but sometimes you're going to have negative conversations. And I always try, if I'm having a negative conversation with someone, to also tell them thank you. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Thank you for being able to come to me with this, and so I can address it, whatever it is. If we're in a group meeting and we're going over hard things, thank you for being brave enough to bring that out and talk about it, because that's not always easy for people. So sometimes even acknowledging that they had to take a step out of their comfort zone can make them feel more at ease, so that way they're willing to do it the next time, because we do need to hear the positive and the negative of life. I mean, I am sunshine and I do like to smile and be that way, but sometimes we have to address that, all of that is. And if I do see someone that's frowning, and I give them a look and they'll like, no, I can't handle sunshine right now. I understand that, because sometimes you just can't. So you have to step away and let them have their moment too. But I think it's important to acknowledge that when people are talking about things that we might not necessarily want to talk about, that it's okay that they can say it too.
I love how you made the declarative statement, I am sunshine. I like that. I am sunshine. Yeah. Dr. Fubar can introduce himself as I am logic. I am reasoning. I know that to be true, but people will eventually begin to respect you for that. They'll respect you for, one, the humility that you exhibit when you said, hey, thank you for sharing, for pointing that out to me. Thank you for giving me that feedback, because now I'll make sure that I don't do that again, or I'll perfect that in some way. You might even be able to get some more feedback and say, hey, how should I have said that? I didn't mean to come across that way. What would have been a better way for me to say that, so that I can be culturally appropriate? Because that's real big too in the workplace. Cultural context. If you hear a group of people talking, you don't just jump in and use the same dialogue or conversation, or slang that they're using. You find out the context of that. And sometimes in friend groups, you really need permission to be let in, or work or otherwise. So I think that that's very good. You pointed out something that I think we can all take away, and that's the humility. The humility of saying, thank you, I needed that. And that's a big step. It takes a lot for some of us to do that, especially for guys. Some of us are a little bit more ego-centered, and we don't want to be wrong. And I'm just speaking on my behalf. I can't speak on behalf of all guys. But when somebody brings it out, I have to thank them. Appreciate it. These are good. Anybody else? Kind of scanning the room here. All right, Antonio, take it away. Thank you guys so much for this time. I look forward to another session with you guys.
Oh, thank you, Terrence, and thank you everyone for joining Leadership Live. Like I said, this one ends the second Q2. So for anybody who needs to catch up or anything like that, please reach out to marketing or look on YouTube for the Rosewood Family of Companies page and catch up on those. But other than that, thank you, Terrence. Thank you, everyone. See you guys in Q3.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.